Hello everybody, this is Michael Hollands once again for Sound of the Movies. Today I have the pleasure to be joined by one of the film industry's best cinematographers, Salvatore Totino. His impressive resume lists more than 500 commercials and several music videos. Ever since 1998, Salvatore has become one of the industry's finest cinematographers. His impressive list of film credits includes Any Given Sunday, Changing Lanes, Cinderella Man, Frost Nixon, The Da Vinci Code, Angels and Demons, Inferno, Everest, Concussion, Spider-Man Homecoming, Bird Box, and many more. It is my pleasure to welcome Salvatore Totino.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It's great to have you on my show. Thank you very much for taking a time out of your schedule today, Salvatore. When did you know you wanted to get involved in the making of commercials and film? Has there been any film or music video or commercial that fascinated you the most?
There were many different films as a young child that, young adult as well, that I loved and fell in love with. I know my parents immigrated from Italy to America, and we grew up in an Italian-American neighborhood, and on Sundays, there was a movie theater called the Walker Theater that featured some Italian films. So I grew up going to the theater watching some neorealism films like Visconti and Fellini, Pasolini, and they left an impression on me. However, I never knew at that young age that I wanted to get into films. I do remember as a young adult going to see Raging Bull and Apocalypse Now. Apocalypse Now and Raging Bull really resonated and left a burning impression on me. And the idea of film was sort of untouchable from where I came from. You either went to, immigrants really impressed education. So you either went to college or learned a trade in my family. And I have learning disabilities. I'm dyslexic. So school was always a little on the tough side for me. I went to college for 2.5 years for engineering, and found no passion in it. So I left school and I went to work for an electrical contractor and working in a trade. I wanted to start taking some photography classes, but before that, I had met a distant relative who was working in the film industry at a family event. And I went to visit him at work one day, and I was just so impressed with what I saw. I was like, well, how can I work here? What can I do? And he encouraged me to work as a production assistant. So I quit my job as an electrical contractor, and I wound up actually going to work for him for a couple of days as a PA. And the minute I stepped on set, I was like, wow, this is what I want to do. I never took photography classes. I wound up buying myself a still camera and taught myself how to print in black and white. And as a production assistant, I'd always stay close to set and really watch what was going on. And one day I met a camera assistant by the name of Paul Gaffney, who, I had a great conversation with him. I really encouraged him to, I encouraged myself really to, try to get in with him and see if I could get him to train me. And he finally agreed to train me, and he took me to camera rental house and started teaching me cameras. And then I started to go on jobs with him and apprentice. And I wound up working in the camera department, and I moved my way up through becoming a second assistant, a loader, a second assistant, a first assistant, and then a cinematographer. And along the way, I met various people. I was a camera assistant for a very avant-garde, out-of-the-box cinematographer by the name of Harris Savides. And I mentored under Harris, and Harris really encouraged me to move on and follow my passion. And he was very supportive in doing that. So it was a very interesting apprenticeship. So it was an interesting path. I think today I still apprentice. You're always learning something in one way or another, whatever you do, whatever job you're on, the different people you work with, the different situations you're in, the different circumstances, the new technology. It's interesting because sometimes my colleagues or young film students or aspiring filmmakers kind of look up to you, and they look to you for wisdom and experience. And it's interesting because I always look at myself as still an apprentice. And I think that you have to be open all the time to being an apprentice, to constantly try to better yourself, better your creativity, to search deeper and further. And when you stop thinking like an apprentice, I think you stop moving forward.
Pretty good point, actually. But I also think, I mean, you have to be able to evolve constantly. You have to be willing to evolve, and I think you have a pretty good point there. And you never stop to learn. That's a fact. You know, each picture that you tackle, I believe, poses or might pose a challenge which you didn't encounter before.
Almost every day. I come home at the end of the day and I think, wow, I should have done this. Maybe I should have done that. I haven't been in this situation before. Oh, I don't know what's coming up now. This has just changed. Let me do some research. Let me figure that out. What other colleagues can I talk to that might help me, give me a little insight? So it's every day. It's every day. And I think that's what's so enthralling about the film industry is
Yes.
that it just doesn't stop. It just keeps moving forward and moving forward, and it's a constant inquisition. You're constantly curious. You're constantly interested in the unknown.
Yes, that's a very good way of putting it. Yes, and thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. Before we talk about the impressive movies you've worked on, I would love to talk a little bit about your work in commercials because, as I mentioned in my introduction, you have shot more than 500 commercials, which is very impressive. And you have been involved in campaigns for Jack Daniels, Nike, Jaguar, if I'm not mistaken. And how would you describe the process of finding the essence of the message that a clip is supposed to bring across? I mean, we are talking about 30-second clips, we are talking about 60-second commercials. So how does that usually work?
Well, you try to find the creative line between selling a product and the artistic creative point of view of it. They used to be, I think commercials were much more creative in the 90s and the early 2000s, up until the digital era. When the digital technology came in, digital photography came in, I think commercials started to become less creative. There's a lot of technology that is being sold, like for example, in cars. You used to do, I remember doing some Mercedes-Benz commercials where we were out in the dry lake bed and at 70 miles an hour doing power slides with the car. Now, there'll be one or two beauty shots of the car, a detailed shot of the car, and then it's all about the technology inside the car. It has voice command. This button does this, and that button, can order your groceries and play music. It's that it's become more focused on that. And in the past, it used to be more focused on a creative level, and they were more story oriented. I think Europe still has a lot more of that, and I attribute that to the process. In Europe, the ad agency hires a director and they give director a cut. So director will prep, shoot, and then edit the spot. Here in America, once you're done filming, the agency takes over and edits the spot. And they have a lot of involvement even when you're shooting. And I think that's made a difference. We used to do a lot of crazy things. We used to experiment. I remember working with Rocky Morton. Rocky Morton, he's known for Max Headroom. Rocky created Max Headroom. He's a very avant-garde film director, commercial director. And there was times we were doing triple exposures on commercials. That isn't done today. Today, you trying to convince an agency to do a triple exposure, and then the cost of doing it digitally is a big post-production where you used to just roll the film, cover it, roll it back, and then roll over it again. And it was all about math and getting your exposures correctly. And you'd create these sort of in-camera effects, and sometimes they'd be really wonderful, and other times you wouldn't even know they wouldn't work out. I did a great music video with Jake Scott for a band called Live. The song's Lightning Crashes, and that's all in-camera double exposures. It's all about an angel who comes and visits life and death. And the angel, every time she appears, she's translucent, and that's all done in camera. And it's very wonderful because as you're working, you have a canvas and a palette, and you're creating, and you're not sure what you're going to create, and you don't know the results until you're done with the painting, and it's really wonderful. It's scary and it's wonderful. You go home at night and you wonder, did I expose the film correctly? Did I underexpose it too much? Is there going to be an image? Did I overexpose it too much? Did I screw up the development when I asked them to push the film 2.5 stops, and or I did a bleach bypass on it? So it was all a creative experiment in a way. And we used to use a lot of that technology, that ideology, so to speak, in commercials. And today they've changed a lot, and they're far and few between that are that sort of creative, I think.
Also, a very good point. And yes, commercials have indeed changed. And if I were to compare TV commercials, in the 90s to the ones we have today, there is a major difference. And sometimes, there is still creativity, but sometimes I look at a commercial and I wonder what this commercial has to do with the actual product they're trying to sell. So it sounds it looks very creative. It has a good photography, and they do their best to come up with something that is meaningful, yet it doesn't necessarily relate to the product. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I do. I do. And you see a lot of that, or you used to. I don't know. I haven't been to the cinema in Europe in a while, but I remember in the 1990s and the 2000s, in being in Europe and going to the cinema just to watch some of the commercials that were shown before feature films, and there'd be 2, 3 minute commercials that were like little mini films, and it was just sort of wonderful way to sort of help sell a product, but in a storytelling way. I don't know if they're still doing that in Europe, but it was, and we used to shoot some of those commercials here in America a lot too. That'd be, this is for the cinema only. And you do get, as a cinematographer, you'd be so excited. Oh, I'm doing a commercial for the cinema.
Yes, they still do that actually.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I believe it's always the same, the same commercials that are on, but but they actually do shoot new commercials, and some of them are really good and very interesting, and some of them just feel like very trite for the.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it always depends, but there is still creativity out there, and they do have nice ideas. Salvatore, you had just mentioned Jake Scott, and you had indeed shot music videos for him. Jake Scott, also Jordan Scott, and also Peter Kerr, and some of the artists whose music you brought to the screen include Tina Turner, REM, Radiohead, Tom Petty, and Soundgarden. And how much time does it actually take to shoot a music video, and how much do you think the technology of today has changed the landscape?
I think they've changed a lot. The technology has them to, well, you know what? I think the technology really is in editing. The editing technology has changed so much in the last 20 years that it's allowed directors in music videos to do things that weren't possible in the past, things that you couldn't do in camera or you couldn't do sort of editorially or in post because it was the technology wasn't there yet, or it was way too expensive. I think the technology and the cost of it has come down so much that is opened up so much that has allowed directors and editors to be very creative on it in a different way, We used to do things a lot more, as I was saying earlier, in camera. So I think that there's the difference there. I did get, and I was very fortunate to work with two incredible directors, Peter Kerr, who actually used to work with Harris Savides, and he'd have me shoot second unit for him often. And then one day he's like, you know what, I want you to shoot a spot for me. And that's how my career sort of got going. And, you know, Peter and Jake were very sort of creative artists that took an artist's point of view when it came to making music videos. I don't know what they are today. I think, and it's hard to say because I haven't played in that field in the past decade. So I couldn't really get in depth. I noticed that as I started slowing down doing music videos, that the record company had a lot more say in the videos than back in my day. In my day, the director would write a treatment and present it to the band and the musician, and the musician would like it, and you just shoot what the director wanted. Now the record companies and everybody's just seem to be much more involved, and I think that sort of changed some of the creativity of them.
Yes.
The music videos back in the '90s that we did, most of them were very different from each other. You know, you'd have a director like Peter Kerr or Jake Scott or Mark Romanek who did videos that were everyone was different from the previous one they did. They never did the same video or the same style or technology that was used in that style. Like, you know, all of Hype Williams, who was, you know, very big rap video director back in the day, uh, all of his videos look alike. You know, and I think, you know, I think that that's what sets an artist apart is the ability to be sort of very creative and look at the artist and the song and what it represents and how they bring their creativity to it. So you know, I think it's changed a lot now.
Yeah, and I think the influence of the record companies, the corporate factor, also kind of may diminish creativity and quality if you get too many cooks who are involved. And it's, well, it's a curse and a blessing maybe, and I think sometimes you just or sometimes you just need to give the director the opportunity to work his magic or her magic and just make a couple of notes. But if they take over entirely, it might not promote creativity. At least
Yeah,
maybe I was exaggerating, but I think you know what I mean and the point I'm trying to bring across.
yeah. No, look, I agree with you, and I mean, look, I'm much more cynical about it. I think it's a bad thing with too many cooks in the kitchen. You hire a director, and then you know, it's like you hire a chef, and then you tell them how to do everything and what tools to use and what ingredients to use, and every time they're doing something, you're having them change it. So they don't even have the ability to create with the tools that you've given them at that moment because you keep changing them on them. And that's bad. You know, you don't go and have surgery and tell the surgeon how to do the surgery.
Yes.
You hire that surgeon for a reason.
Yes.
You know, and I mean, I'm using that as an analogy. Same thing with a plumber in your house. You have a plumber come and he needs to you know, put in a new hot water heater, and then you're there telling him what to do and what tools to use and what pipes to use and how to, you know, and as he's putting it in, you're making him change it and redo something, and it's like, wait a second, he's the plumber. He or she, you know, that when I say he, I don't mean, I'm not being gender specific here. I'm
Yes.
just mean in general. But, you know, so I think that it's a bad thing. And I think it stifles creativity
Yes.
when you have too many cooks in the kitchen. So to me, I always think it's sort of negative. It's one thing when you work in a collaborative environment and you build on something, then that's different because you're collaborating and you have an idea and then you take this idea and you're working together with it. It's not it's not somebody over you telling you how to do it, but you're working together. And I think when you do work together and collaborate, you make a better creative product in the end. I mean, that's how I feel about it. I'll probably get blasted for it, but it's the truth.
Salvatore, now I would love to talk about the first feature film which you did back in 1998. It was Oliver Stone's Any Given Sunday, one of my favorite Oliver Stone movies. When did this opportunity present itself?
Well, in 1998, Oliver was getting ready to prep the film, and Oliver always works with Bob Richardson, and Bob was committed to another project. So Oliver was looking for a cinematographer, and Bob's agent, Bob Richardson's agent, happened to be my agent, and Oliver had a relationship with him, and asked him like who's new and young and up and coming and doing music videos and interesting work. And my agent sent him my reel along with other cinematographers, and Oliver saw my reel. He interviewed me and several other cinematographers, and for some reason he gave me the film, which was, I was very grateful. I was very excited. Oliver was always a very big hero of mine. I thought he was a director that was very avant-garde and pushed the limits, did sort of very interesting films that were always very provocative and thought-provoking. And it was totally insane. We're doing Any Given Sunday. It was nothing I've ever had experienced or have experienced since.
Okay.
I'm very happy that I did the film, and I think that it's made me a different person because I happened to go down that road. I think if I didn't do an Oliver Stone film, I might not be where I am today because of who it made me.
What made this experience so insane, if you don't mind me asking?
Oliver Stone.
I mean, yeah. I mean, you don't have to comment on it if you don't want to.
No, please. I mean, Oliver is like, he's a method director, and he becomes what he's directing. So, you are living, it's a light on the field. That sport is like gladiators. It's a battle. And off the field, it's a party. So in Miami, back in the 90s, the partying, the fighting on the fields, I mean, it was just full throttle, 24/7. And that's the way Oliver saw the football back at that time. So it wasn't just football; it was also the personalities and the lives that the players would be living out off the field. And Oliver was living that all the time. So it was, constantly, you never knew what was coming at you or where it was coming from. So, I always say this, and I've said this in other interviews. On the first day of principal photography, Oliver said, "Welcome to Vietnam." I was like, what the fuck does he mean, welcome to Vietnam? And he, he meant exactly that. You either went to Vietnam and you came home in a body bag, or you came home alive with PTSD, or, you made it through. And definitely I walked that line of PTSD for a little while before I recovered. But I didn't come back in a body bag. And I think that's that's what it was like. Jamie Foxx and LL Cool J had there's a scene in the movie where they have a fight on the field and the coach breaks it up. Well, there's a lot of ego going on there, and they had a real full-blown fist fight over Al Pacino's head. Al had no idea what was going on. He's there acting, trying to break up the fight, and it's a real fight. And the crew and even the line producer, Clayton Townsend, we all rushed on the field to break up the fight. That's the insanity of Any Given Sunday.
Crazy. But it's funny you should mention that, because actually I rewatched the movie just 2 days ago, and they actually do have an in-film fight in the locker room when LL Cool J says to Jamie Foxx, Willie Beeman, he says, "Forget your invisible juice," because Jamie Foxx had done this interview with John C. McGinley in the film, and he was bragging about how great a football player he was, and the other team's defense. The players won't even get a hold of him because he's got this invisible shoes, and when he turns it on, he's gone. L Cool J makes fun of him, and then the fight breaks out in the locker room in the film, and then Al Pacino comes and breaks it up.
Yes, but that fight was a scripted fight. That fight on the field turned into, even though it was scripted, turned into a real physical fight.
Okay.
Like two grown men on the street punching each other for real.
Okay.
It wasn't fake.
Okay.
There was an injury involved after that. So, yes, those two characters had tension in the film, and Oliver loved feeding off of that. But it got to a point where it gone beyond professionalism and work and became real.
Okay.
So it was a real fight.
Okay.
Crazy.
Sounds crazy.
But look, that's Oliver, and Oliver, I think he's a genius filmmaker. Very creative, as I said earlier, very avant-garde, very thought-provoking. He's probably one of the most intelligent people you've ever met. I think if Oliver didn't kind of keep putting these roadblocks in front of himself in a way, we would be seeing a lot more work from him. I would love to work with him again. I really would.
Also, I think it was on Natural Born Killers when Robert Richardson got really agitated because Oliver Stone had reportedly pushed him very hard, and I heard that Oliver Stone likes to test people, and he wants to explore, or he wants to, let's say, get the best performance out of everybody, and if that means he has to rub somebody the wrong way in order to get that anger or that frustration, then he will just do it.
He pushes you so far to the edge that if you take an extra breath in, you'd fall off.
Okay.
That's how close he pushes you.
Okay.
And because he pushes you to that point, having known Bob and myself, you're not going to let that defeat you.
Yeah.
And that's what Any Given Sunday was. It was that, it was a battle in a sense, and you're bringing creativity to it. I think that Any Given Sunday changed the way sports photography was photographed from that moment on. I took the camera. I had a huge fight with Second Unit on it because they wanted to film football like the way football's filmed on television, from the sidelines and long lenses. And I was like, no, we're putting the camera in the game. You can't do that, blah, blah, blah. And that's what was great about Oliver, is that when Second Unit was telling us that we don't know what we're doing and how to do it, Oliver was like, all right, I'm going to show you. And we did it. We took over. First Unit took over a lot of Second Unit's work, and I put that camera in the game. I made the audience feel what it's like to be on the field, and having a 300-pound person that can move 40 yards at 4.5 seconds coming at you. It hadn't been done before. And I think, it changed. It really changed sports filming, feature films from that moment on.
Yes.
And I'm very proud of that.
Right. And I mean, the film is pretty crazy and it's intense. The editing and how everything has been presented. I mean, just the dinner scene between Pacino and Jamie Foxx, and how the Ben-Hur moments were cut into this dialogue. It was absolutely insane. Or the football sequences, but in general, I think the cinematography and how everything was done is really innovative. It was shot marvelously and magnificently, and it's just one of the 90s finest films, in my humble opinion, also in terms of cinematography. I really believe that.
Oh, thank you very much. And I took that ideology that I used on Any Given Sunday into Cinderella Man.
Yes,
You know,
I was going to ask you about that as well. And as you had or also taken the audience inside the boxing ring, and you shot the film beautifully, but the in-ring sequences also made me feel like I'm a part of the boxing match. And how did you accomplish that? Did you use a Steadicam for those shots, or how did?
nope, nope. That was me in the ring, handheld with the camera. So I would learn. I grew up in Brooklyn fighting, unfortunately, and I was, I also trained a little bit as a young teenager, boxing wise, not much. But I was into the sport and I understood the sport. I just learned the choreography of each fight, paying attention to the choreography and working with the trainers and Russell Crowe as well as the other boxers and watching their moves and knowing each fight. I knew where and how to put the camera there. I was very comfortable getting in the ring with it. Ron was very worried about it, Ron Howard. When we, in prep, we went to see some boxes here in Los Angeles in the Valley, and we took little video cameras, and Ron wanted to just see what the fights would look like, just from outside the ring. And I started talking to the boxers, and I asked them, I said, what are they looking to do? How are they looking to move? Blah blah blah. And I watched one or two rounds, and I realized how one of the boxers was moving. And I got in the ring, and Ron's like, "What are you doing? What are you doing, Sal? Are you crazy?" And I was like, "No, no, Ron, let me try, let me try." And he always knew that I'd like to push things a little bit. And I got in the ring, and I understood that boxer's move, and I felt very comfortable with where I could be with the camera. And afterwards, Ron's like, "What are you thinking?" I'm like, "I'm thinking we could put the camera in the ring." He's like, "Sal, I don't know. I can't take a chance of getting an actor hurt." I said, "Look, let's try it in prep and see how it works." So while we were prepping, and like I said, I was working with the boxers and the trainers and Russell, and we did a couple of tests. And, Ron was like, "All right, you feel comfortable?" I'm like, "I do." And he's like, let me talk to Russell and the boxers. And they were like, "Yeah, and the trainers." And everybody's like, "Yeah, we're okay with that." We got to put the camera in the ring. And I think that made a big difference. But what I did in Cinderella Man was take that even further. I wanted to understand James Braddock's psychology in the fights and what he was going through at certain moments. And there were times when he was unsure, or he was a little disoriented, or there was a moment of clarity. I used different techniques. I used different cameras with some old cameras with different types of shutters and older lenses, or I put a camera inside a tire and created a suspension like a boxing bag that I can move around the ring so that the actors could actually hit the camera. And I use those for different points in different fights. And if you really watch the film, you could see some of the differences there. Whether I used an IMO with Nikon lenses and an old Arri 2C with some C mounts, old Zeiss lenses. I shot most of the film on Cooke S4s at the time, and then I, introduced some of these other lenses and cameras for different moments. I based most of the color palette on the film on a painter called George Tucker. I really his he had a his paintings have this sort of warm palette to it, but there's a layer of depression in his character's eyes that I kind of wanted to bring into this film through the lighting, and I think we really sort of created that there. And I was very Cinderella Man is one of the films I'm most proudest of. Cinderella Man and Frost Nixon, two of my films where I really felt that I really stood naked in front of the world. I really just put so much of myself into them, and I'm very proud of them.
Right, rightfully so. And Frost Nixon, I believe it's one of his finest movies. How would you describe this movie? How did you capture the 1970s on film, or especially the interview between David Frost, Richard Nixon?
Well, it's interesting because while we were in prep, Ron had given me the tapes of the real interviews. And I sort of put it on. I started to watch it for a second. And I turned it off, and I said, I can't let this influence the way we approach the film. And Ron was concerned about the interviews, and I looked at it as though these are two opponents getting ready to battle. So when Ron was like, "Look, I'm really concerned. How are we going to approach this?" And I was like, "Ron, it's a boxing match. That's all it is. It's two opponents getting ready to battle, and each interview is a certain round." And that was our ideology behind the approach in the interviews. So, you had great characters and great stories that were leading up to it. And it's really these two opponents that were building and training towards a final battle. And that's how we approach the film. The production design, the lighting all helped to add into the 70s look and feel of the film.
Salvatore, how do you work with actors, or how do you, let's say, communicate with a director and then also turn to the actors and say, well, this is what we're going to do, especially when you are, let's say, working on a film which features a star-studded cast, such as, for instance, Any Given Sunday, which was your first movie?
First of all, I believe in respect and a hierarchy. So it's a matter of the director and following the director's lead and their communication. And when you're blocking out a scene and you're working with an actor, you just communicate. The director, you see where the director is communicating with them and what they're saying, and then you sort of just build on that in a very straightforward, honest way. Good actors really want to act and work with you. Tom Hanks is unbelievable with the camera. Kate Blanchett too. She's amazing, and they understand what you're trying to do and how you want to help them with their performances.
What do you think is the most complicated shots you ever had to pull off?
Oh boy, I mean, there's tough because there are a lot of different shots in a lot of different films. I did something recently on a small film directed by David Ayer called Tax Collectors. It's about the Mexican mafia here in Los Angeles. It's a little small film, $5 million movie. And we had one day where we used a robotic arm. And it's a scene of these guys busting in and shooting up a safe house. That was tricky because you needed to plan it out. You needed to choreograph where each of the actors were. There was gunfire involved. There was squibs involved. There was a camera moving at extreme. It moved across the room in 2 seconds from one side of the room to the other, and it changes elevation and swings this arm around. So it was complicated having to make sure you knew where and how it was going to move with the actors, because it literally, if it hit somebody, it would kill them. So that's the sort of most recently difficultly challenged shot I did. But just working on Everest, working in the elements every day was a different type of challenge. How am I going to get the camera up the side of the mountain? How can I do a dolly move? We did a dolly move in Italy on a mountain where we used a helicopter to fly in a dolly so that we could lay dolly track and do a dolly move in on top of a mountain.
My first guess would have been, or one of the scenarios I could possibly imagine as being very difficult and tricky, was shooting, the football scenes, for instance, on Any Given Sunday, or or certain scenes in Everest, as I believe the weather conditions can compromise your work.
Yes, they do, and they compromise the equipment, your psychology, your physical being. I got nerve damage in my toes when we did Everest. It was, very challenging in that sense.
The temperatures also affect the lenses, probably, right?
Yes, they do. And when the temperature gets, when you're filming in lower temperature, you need to change the grease, the viscosity of the grease in the lenses. So all the lenses needed to be taken apart and re-greased with a different type of grease. Then when we move back to stage, we need to change the lenses over again. Yeah.
The film was shot on location, but also in the studio, also using CGI backgrounds. Is that right?
Yes, CGI backgrounds and sets that were built and incorporated CGI and sets. So the ice falls, the summit, the Hillary Step, Camp 4 at night was all done on stage. And the location where Rob Hall dies was all done on stage. You know, you want to talk about something technically difficult? That was how to create Everest on stage. And that was very challenging in the sense that, look, you're at the top of the world. The sun's very strong. The shadows are very strong. We shot the 007 stage in Pinewood, very big studio. I needed to create a sky and then the sun. So we used 500 flow bank lights through some silks in the ceiling of the studio. And then I brought in soft suns to create a hard shadow and was very particular about where in the sky the sun was during the time of the day. I wanted to be very accurate about that. And it was challenging to get those balances correctly. And I think we really achieved that because when you look at the film, it does not look like it's on stage. It's tricky on stage because when you want to film an exterior, you need to create an ambient environment, which requires a lot of lighting.
I have come across an interview recently. I recall that you at some point were hanging from a cliff to get some footage.
Not quite a cliff, but we were hanging. We were in harnesses all the time and roped in on the sides of mountains because of dangers of falling and avalanches. That that interview might have been from a commercial I did where I was literally off hanging off a cornice with snowboarders flying over my head. I was for a couple hours with a film camera. But we were always in harnesses and uh, roped in very precarious places. It was just normal. You know, it would be no different than a steel worker, an iron worker on a skyscraper. They wear a harness, they harness in, and they go up to work each day. You put your clothes on, you put your harness on each day. You double check your harness, triple check your harness. Okay, anytime I go anywhere, am I clipped in? Am I clipped in? Let me check the clip. Let me make sure it's tied in properly. And it becomes second nature to you, and you're constantly checking it. And so you don't think about it after a while. You're just like, okay, clip, boom. Okay, let's get to it. Give me the camera over here. You know?
That's good.
Actually, sometimes it gives you an extra sense of security because it is a precarious location. You're on the side of a ridge, and you are clipped in. You're helping the camera department. You're carrying a piece of equipment, and because you're tied in, and you have that, you just have an extra sense of security, and it makes it easier to move in a way because you know I'm okay. If I fall, I'm going to be fine, and you never fall either. Somehow we never fell.
Yeah, thank God. you know.
We did have a location. We were shooting Camp 3, and we were in Italy, in the Dolomites, the eastern end of the Dolomites, up a side of a very steep cliff where Camp 3, where the art department had cut in all these tents, and we cut in a little path above it to lay some dolly track down. And we were all harnessed in, and it started snowing, and it was snowing, and it was snowing. And about 4 hours into our day, Mountain Safety turns to the AD and says, everybody's got to get off. We're like, why? The avalanche warning. We're like, it doesn't seem like anything. And having had some previous experiences in life, I was like, okay. I was like, let's go. But the director's like, but it doesn't seem like it. I'm like, we got to go. So we all get off the mountain, you know, that part, we make a location move. And 2 hours later, it was an avalanche that buried the whole set. You know, you listen to safety people that are around you. So you're harnessed in, you have safety people in place to help make sure that nobody gets hurt, and you follow the rules, so to speak.
I know you are a proud member of the ASC, the American Society of Cinematographers, and also of the AIC. Which film got you into these organizations?
Well, it's not the film. You get invited in by members. So
Yes.
members recommend you, and other members then sponsor you. I got into the ASC after Da Vinci Code, and Harris Savides had sponsored me to get into the American Society of Cinematographers, and Luciano Tovoli and Dante Spinotti sponsored me to get into the AIC.
And speaking of the Da Vinci Code, I was going to ask you about those movies anyway. You worked with Ron Howard on the Da Vinci Code, then Angels and Demons, and of course Inferno. How would you describe your work on these three particular films and the evolution of cinematography going from Da Vinci to Inferno?
Well, it's interesting because Da Vinci and Angels we shot on film, and Inferno we shot digitally. And in hindsight, I wish I would have shot Inferno on film just to keep the trilogy the same. Ron had offered it to me, but we were in Budapest in 2015. There weren't any labs around. Film would have had been shipped to London. The labs had changed in London at that point, so it was felt a little too nerve-wracking to approach it then, and film. So that's why I went digital with it. But in regards to keeping sort of a trilogy together, it would have been better for me, I think. Not better, but just to kind of keep it in the same vein. I think each film has a different look to it. Angels and Demons, I really used the idea of painting with light. There were a lot of churches involved, the Sistine Chapel, the Sala Reggio, the Basilica, and I wanted to create more of a Renaissance type of lighting there. And we really achieved that, I think. At one point, I had 10, I think we had 10 20K beam projectors. Had most of the ones that were in Los Angeles at the time in 2008. I remember another cinematographer on another film calling me up saying, "Hey, are you using all those lights? Can you lend me two for the film I'm on?" And we wound up sending them over to him. They helped me to really create shafts of light in a way like Caravaggio painting would have been, and that's where I really went with Angels and Demons. Lighting wise, for me, Angels and Demons was probably my favorite because of that. I think we brought an interesting. Each film has sort of a different look to it, a little bit, because they're different places and different time period. So I kind of wanted to make them all feel a little different.
Did you use Arri Alexa cameras for Inferno?
Yes, yes, we used the Alexa XTs.
Was this the first film you shot digitally?
No, Everest was.
Right, Inferno was released in 2016. Oh, okay, yes, and
Yeah.
Everest in 2015.
Yes, that's correct.
Which approach do you prefer personally? Would you like to shoot digitally as of now on?
No, no, no. I depending on the story, I would use the technology that was appropriate to help tell the story.
I'm just asking because I know there are directors out there who want to shoot digitally. They want.
And some only want to use film. Chris Nolan, for example, only wants to shoot film.
There are pros and cons, and if a director decides to use the digital approach exclusively, well, then so be it. But as you just said, it depends on the movie. If you do a period piece, you might use different cameras and still use Panavision or whichever works best for you and for the story which needs to be told.
Exactly. And also, even when you shoot digital, there's the different digital cameras and different formats that you would use. There's a small little film that I might do at the end of the summer, waiting to hear whether it's going to happen. And I'm going to test the Arri 65 for it because I think that would be very appropriate to help tell this story. We'll see. We'll see how it plays out.
Is there any director out there whom you haven't worked with yet that you would like to work with in the future?
I'd love to work with Scorsese, my old-time hero.
Scorsese is a great choice. He's probably my second favorite director of all time.
Who's your first?
Probably Steven Spielberg.
Oh yeah, yeah, I could see that.
But it's you know, Salvatore, it's always hard to say he or she is my all-time favorite. I find it
I know what you mean. Yes.
yeah, but I would probably put Ron Howard on number 3, number 4. So Ron Howard is in my top 5.
I'd be happy to just keep working with Ron. I think Ron's work is different from one to the next. Ron constantly his work ethic is beyond anybody you've seen. He's so focused and so prepared and such a collaborator that it's really, really enjoyable to work with him. And because of that work ethic, subconsciously, he just pushes oneself to push themselves further. And it's really wonderful. It's really wonderful to be able to work with somebody like that.
Have you and Ron spoken about future collaboration already?
Oh, yes, yes, yes. There's different projects for different times, and he does work with the other people as well for other reasons. But yeah, we're good friends. We talk all the time, and yeah, there's some projects
Great.
that are possible that might be coming down. We never know.
I haven't had the pleasure yet of meeting Ron Howard, but I hear just very good things about him and that he's a pleasure to work with and a really nice guy. And
He is. He's all of the above.
yes, and but I could think of a couple of directors that might match your style or that might push you to explore new things.
I would love to work with Chris Nolan. I would love to work with Tarantino. They have directors there's the directors of photography that they always work with. I don't, I would love that opportunity. And I don't mind, directors that are difficult. Life isn't always easy, doesn't need to be.
Of course, life isn't always easy, as you just mentioned, and there are many people in the industry who can make your work experience quite challenging. Because I've also heard that Quentin Tarantino is incredibly difficult to please, and I've also heard the same about let's say Michael Bay, who I think has a tremendous eye for detail, and the camera work and cinematography in his movies can be very stunning, actually.
Yes, they can. And Michael, I've worked with Michael in commercials.
Oh, really?
Michael, yeah, he's very, very creative, and he knows where to put the camera. He really understands lighting and what he wants out of it, and he knows how to push the limits. Michael is not that nice of a person, and I would not want to do a feature film with him.
Okay.
I don't want to be yelled at all day for no fucking reason. That he is like that, and I don't think that's a way to sort of get people to do better. I don't mind being yelled at, but for no reason, it's not fun. Look, he is a very successful director. The stories that he does tell are done really well. He's a great filmmaker for the types of film he does, and he's very successful and he's very creative at doing it. It's his process that I think that is what the negativity that you hear from other filmmakers, other cinematographers and other people involved talk about. And so that's the not positive side to it. But the positive side is that he does his films really well.
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
does care about the films he does. But, do I care to work with somebody like that? No, I don't. Life's too short, and I want to be, part of the process. I want to be sort of creative. I want to collaborate. And like I said earlier, I don't mind getting yelled at, but to get yelled and screamed at constantly all day long is you know what? Go have fun. I don't care how much money you're going to pay me or
Okay.
I'm not interested in being part of that.
Now I would love to talk a little bit about the post-production process. What can you tell me about your involvement there? Because usually shooting a movie, well, depending on the schedule, can take, if I'm not mistaken, 8 to 12 weeks, 15 weeks. It depends on the movie and on the budget.
Usually not that much until it comes to doing the DI. There are times like I did Space Jam last summer, And there's times, a couple of times, the visual effects supervisor will give you a call saying, "Hey, we're going in a certain direction with something. We want you to come in and improve it, or see what your thoughts are on the CG work that we're about to do in regards to coloring. We want to make sure that it fits in with your vision." uh,
The
that
I'm sorry, the DI, that's the digital
digital
in yeah.
intermediate, when you get the film ready, once it's finished editing and all the CGI work is done, then you sort of it's like a, in layman's terms, a simple term, like photoshopping the whole film
Yes.
to get it ready for release into the cinema.
I wasn't quite sure if there is another term for DI, so I was on the right track.
Yeah, yeah, digital intermediate. Yes,
Good.
yes, sir. That's sort of the extent of post production. Once in a while, an editor will bring you in and say, "Hey, you want to see how the cut's coming along?" Not often. Ron's sometimes open to that. What's nice about working with Ron is when it does come time to the DI, we sit down with the colorist, Ron, myself, and go through that. We watch the whole film together, and we just start, as we're watching the film, we start just saying general notes, and somebody's there taking notes down, and then my colorist would suggest that we come back in a couple of days. And Ron's usually like, "Why don't you go back? And when you get the film in a place that you're happy with, I'll come in and we'll start looking at it." So I'll go back 3-4 days later and sit down with my colorist and start to really refine. So he'll do a pass, or she'll do a pass over the whole film. And then I come in and start really refining sort of the scenes with them. And then Ron comes in, come in at one point. I'm like, "Hey, Ron, come have a look, blah, blah." And he'll come in and he'll start having some comments. But it's pretty much just that. And that's a really wonderful, and I really enjoy working that way. It's a director who really trusts you. He trusts your vision in the film. There's a bond there. However, there are other films that have a lot more cooks in the kitchen. And in the end, sometimes the film does not go in a direction that you want it to go into, where you might push something a little further and they have you take it back. It's not as pleasant.
On the set, you also have the video village. And how would you describe the development in that department? Because I know that the director usually, looks at the camera, and the DP oftentimes is sitting right next to him, and you follow what's been shot right on the screen. But nowadays, due to the advancement in technology, you can also do things like color correction on the fly, right?
Yes, in-camera LUTs, live, so sort of a live color grade. So the way I like to work is I have a DIT, digital intermediate technician, who has a whole little video setup, and then there's the director and the video village, and I bounce back and forth between the two, and I also operate camera as well, so I'm always all over the place. But I have a relationship with my DIT, and I establish sort of where I want to go with something, and they'll sort of do an on-set color correction, and there's a LUT that's already sort of that we've created with the post house that's doing our dailies. And my colorist will sort of do on-set correction with my input, and then the media goes to the post house for dailies, and then I have a colorist there who kind of refines it and creates my dailies. And that's the way I enjoy working in the digital intermediate world. When I work with film, the funny thing about working with film today is you have to keep reminding the director when they're looking at the monitor, it doesn't look like that. Because the video tap on film cameras, there's a tremendous amount of light loss. It's the way the cameras are built. It goes through a mirror and a prism. What they're seeing on the screen isn't the same as a digital camera where you're seeing exactly what you're getting. So a lot of times the director will be like, "It's too dark." It's like, "No, it's on film." I'm like, "No, it's not. It's there. You have to trust me. You have to trust me."
But nowadays, that's also let's say the process has improved greatly, because back in the day, when you wanted to watch dailies, you could only watch, let's say, if you wanted to check Monday's work, you could only do it on a Tuesday, right? Because the film needed to be processed.
Yes, yes. Tuesday morning, you'd see dailies. You'd wait for a report from the lab, a negative report. So usually in the morning, the lab's calling you. You're calling the lab. How's my negative? Negative's good. What are my printing light numbers? So you know where your exposure is. And then you'd see dailies at the end of the day, whether you're projecting them or they came on a DVD. Today, you still see the dailies the next day. However, you're seeing it live, so you know what you're getting. And then when you do see the dailies, a lot of times now they're using streaming platforms. So you try to get an iPad that's color corrected, or have a monitor at home that they come and calibrate for you so that it kind of represents what you're looking at. And then you try to stream and look at your dailies. Some of the streaming platforms are frustrating because you can't really fast forward well, or they lag in time. And if you have a director who's printing everything, it could be hours worth of dailies.
A very interesting process. Time is always a factor, time and money basically. You need to make sure you are right on schedule, and you have to prepare the day, and then you have to shoot maybe, let's say, 5 pages a day or 10 pages a day. I believe to coordinate everything is just immensely stressful.
Yeah, I guess you can say stressful, or it's just part of our job.
Yes.
And it's about being prepared. So, you try to, I think that's where experience really comes in and helps you. You try to foresee things and prepare for them so that you're ready to be able to move quickly when you need to. I haven't really done 10-page days. I think that's more of television. Thank God I haven't done that. I've done 6-page, 7-page days, but they're tough. They're really tough. But I think you could get a lot done if the actors are really prepared and know their characters really well. The director's really on top of it and doesn't do too many takes. And that all has to do with that preparation, and that you're prepared, that you know what you need to do for each part of those scenes, and where you want the camera and what equipment you need to achieve the shots that you want to get. And you plan it out like any coach of any sports team is planning out the plays that they're going to play during the game. You look at it in that sort of way. Or how I'm going to use a military analogy, but even like, when somebody's going into battle and they strategically planning a battle, you approach filming in these types of ways. It's all about being prepared. It's about trying to think ahead. And look, do you get caught up? Do you miss something? Yeah, all the time you do. And you learn to improvise, and you learn to roll and change that, And the big thing too, I think, when you're doing that, is learning how to listen to your crew. Because there's times that you come up with what you think is the best plan, and in the middle of working it, your key grip will come to you and say, hey, in 2 hours when we're moving on to this thing, I realize that this, and this aren't going to quite work out. And you have to be open enough to listen and understand and trust who you've hired and go, oh, wow, they got a point there. Okay, what can we do to get ahead of that? How can we change and deal with that? And they'll come back to you and say, well, we could try this, we could try A, we could try B, we could try C. And you're like, oh, you know what? Hey, I think B sounds right. What do you think? Yeah, okay. No, I don't think B's right. Actually, I think C's right. They might turn to you and say, and whether you trust in that person or not, to have them implement that. I think that's a big thing. And I think that's how you deal with a difficult day, and you deal with the stress of it. So I turn that to like stress me out. To me, I'm in the middle of a sports game, and I'm having fun doing what I'm doing, and all of a sudden the other team's changed up the play. I got to change things up to sort of get around it. That comes with experience, and experience not just in the level of technology.
Okay, great.
But in person human interaction, learning how to listen and talk to and communicate with people really helps you tremendously.
Do you usually get involved with a project during pre-production?
Oh yeah. I'm very involved in pre-production. It's very important. On feature films, you're looking at many different locations before a location is picked. with the production designer, will go out first, look at a bunch of locations, present them to the director and myself, and then we all go and look at the locations, and then we talk about the scene that would take place in that location and how we would approach it, or what could be wrong or right about the location. And, you come up sometimes with, oh, this is a great location. It's like, yeah, but I got no way to light this location to make it match the story. Well, that's a bummer. Or I really want this. What can we do to make that happen? You work with a team of all departments to try to achieve that. And that's the pre-production of a project is just as exciting as being in the middle of filming in a different way.
Movies can take the audience on a great ride, and certain films enable the audience to participate emotionally. When you, as a cinematographer, work on films such as People Like Us, how do you experience strong performances?
Well, you know what? I'm happy you brought up People Like Us. When I read that script, I really related to it. And it was interesting. I sort of felt that there was something personal about this script. So when I met with the director told me, he's like, look, it's a fictionalized story of kind of my life. And I was like, well, what do you mean? He says, well, when I was 30 years old, I was at a birthday party, and a woman came up to me and introduced herself as my sister. I was like, what? He said, yeah. He said, my father had previously had a family, and he got divorced. And he remarried to my mother. And when I was born, a short time after I was born, his mother sort of forbid the father really from seeing the other family. So he grew up not knowing he had a sister. And he found that afterwards. So he wrote this story sort of based on a real life experience. So there's scenes in the movie that, even though they were fictionalized, felt really real. So you find those things in the story and you look at, okay, what can I do now to help invoke that emotion? And you get an actor like Chris Pine, who was fucking amazing in it. And we worked really closely together. And I think Chris really felt that we were helping him sort of bring out that emotion. You do that in a very subtle way, in an unconscious way, or, sometimes a little bit more direct, but not in a hard way. And a lot of that came through in People Like Us. I'm proud of that film too. It really didn't get much attention, but it was interesting. You talked about Spielberg earlier. Spielberg produced the film, and in pre-production, we were doing a presentation, and the film budget was like $18 million. And Spielberg says, he says, this is costing me $18 million to send Alex to therapy. because it was a personal story, and I think that Stephen really appreciated that, and that's why he said it that in a way with a little sense of humor to it. But you feel really proud when you work on a project like that, because it was a personal project to somebody. And I love Alex Kurtzman, the director, and I think he's sort of very brave to tell a personal story. That's very difficult for a lot of people to do, and to come out and say that. And it must have been difficult for his relationship with his mother and father too, to bring that up. Probably opened up a lot of old wounds. But he was a very brave person for writing that film and pushing it forward. And I'm very happy, I'm very proud, and I'm very lucky to be part of that project.
If we still have some time left, I would love to talk about Spider-Man Homecoming. In 2017, you had entered the Spider-Man universe. The film was directed by John Watts. And please tell me a bit about this particular project and the challenges you faced on this particular film.
It was a difficult film for me to work on. Because I was so used to working in a different way and working with a director that I had a very collaborative relationship with. I also was going through something a little personal in my life at that time. So it was, the film was a little sort of disjointed for me because of a lot of cooks in the kitchen and things constantly changing, and my mental state at the time not being able to handle some of that. as best as I could. So it's not one of my proudest moments. I wish I could go back and redo that, just to deal with it personally in a different way. I really like John Watts. I'd love to work with John again. It was a new project for John. He had never done anything that big before. Which you realize how daunting that is. I never sort of thought about that because, my first project was a very big project. It was Oliver Stone, and with an incredible ensemble cast, including Al Pacino, which was my childhood hero. I didn't look at it in a daunting way, and I didn't realize that other people would look at it and feel differently about doing a project like that. And, I wasn't good with things sort of changing up and sort of the politics of the process of how it worked back then. And then I think, in the DI and that film, there was a lot of people involved. And when you look at a lot of Marvel films, and rightfully so, it's part of that comic book genre. They kind of all look the same. And I was hoping that maybe we would sort of push this in a little bit of a different direction. So it wasn't one of my proudest moments.
Okay.
And I think that, if I had a second chance to go back and redo things, I'd approach things a lot differently.
Okay.
So, I'm not proud of myself. When I say it was not one of my proudest moments, I'm really not proud of myself at that time.
Now I feel bad because I
No,
conjured up some bad memories.
no, you didn't. Don't, please don't feel bad. I think that's good that you brought it up. It's not, that's something that, look, bad or good memories, they're all learning experiences. I'm open to looking at myself and working on myself to learn and improve myself. And that was sort of a low moment in my life that I pushed through and I learned from. I've changed a lot, and I'm a better person today because of it.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's not, you didn't bring up any bad feelings. You just brought up
Good.
a truth to talk about. Yeah, I got nothing to hide about all this. I mean, there's things that we've done in our life that we're sort of shameful for doing and how we've done them, but we did it. So the only thing you could do is learn from it and become a better person.
Yeah, that's very true.
And,
Very true.
So
Yeah,
we've all make mistakes.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and well, everybody makes mistakes, and it would be, I would be surprised if there were a person out there who didn't, and we, at some point, I believe we have to realize that making a mistake or even a major mistake might have led to a more fulfilling and better life, even though we don't necessarily perceive it that way when we go through bad times or the shit is hitting the fan.
Exactly. That there's a lot of truth in that, but we have to be open to learn from those mistakes afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely.
And recognize that you make those mistakes.
I couldn't agree more. I actually also wanted to talk a little bit about different styles, because you just said that certain films tend to look alike, and when I examine your work, I feel the movies do not look alike.
Thank you.
You seem to use you seem to employ a different style, different camera angles, different shots, or tracking shots also. If I look at Any Given Sunday, for instance, the look couldn't be any more different than, let's say, The Dilemma, for instance, or The Missing. I feel there is a big variety in your cinematography.
Thank you. For me, that's who I am. And I look at each project in a way that how am I going to help tell the director's story, the director's vision? So each story is a different story. So the photography should be different because they are different stories. Photography it is storytelling. It's visual, but it's visual storytelling that's helping the audience travel through the director's story and vision. So it can't be all alike. That would be like going to a restaurant and there's just one dish on the menu, 365 days a year. You know, and it's you have restaurants and chefs that, yeah, they have a set menu of certain things on the menu, and then they run specials. And their specials involve, one of my favorite restaurants in London called the River Cafe. Their restaurant's very seasonal, and it's about what ingredients and vegetables and proteins are in season at that time. So it's constantly sort of changing because that's what that story needs to be told at that time in spring, whether it's the spring, peas,
Yes.
for example, and you can have peas all year, but they're not going to be the same sort of peas, but they shouldn't be. You shouldn't have them all year.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally.
you know?
I wholeheartedly agree. You should be willing to explore a new style or to evolve and change. And it also makes
Yeah.
you a more experienced and better artist. I know there are some people who like to live in the comfort zone. You know what I mean? Maybe I shouldn't say that. Many artists I feel are asked to repeat themselves. They are known for a certain style and that's what they get asked to do. And if they try to look outside the box, the idea is being shut down.
Yes, that happens sometimes, and I think that's why I get overlooked on projects sometimes because I don't do that. Nobody's ever asked me. Nobody's come to me saying, "Hey, I've liked what you've done in this film, and I want you to repeat that." I haven't been in that ever been in that situation, and I hope not to be. So, I think sometimes I get overlooked for projects because I have too much diversity. But look, my diversity is about the story and how that story needs to be told. That's the way I
Yes.
look at it. And we're all different. We're all different people, and yeah, some of us like to be in a comfort zone. Some of us like to be uncomfortable. Yeah, I'm a. Besides being dyslexic, I'm ADD, so I can't sit in a comfort zone too long. I get bored and distracted.
Yeah, I I get what I get your
Yeah.
point. And
Right.
but I mean, I'm glad you keep busy. I mean, you have great stuff coming up. You have two films in post production right now: Space Jam and The Tax Collector, right?
Yeah, Tax Collectors, it's been completed and it is now going to be released. It's been finished. It's got a great look to it. A really interesting story. Great unknown actor, new to the scene, and also Shia LaBeouf is co-starring in it as well. And David Ayer is an incredible director who I hope to continue to work with. I love his work.
Okay,
I
great.
think he likes pushing the limits as well.
Okay, great.
And then Space Jam. Space Jam is in post production now. That was a really big undertaking. I came in on the project after I think 11 days, no, 20 days of filming. They fired the director on the film,
Okay.
um, and they brought in a new director. I came in on a Monday to meet with the director, and Wednesday I was in the office prepping, and the following Monday we were shooting. The cinematographer had left with the director. He decided that he wanted to honor the director and walk with them, and I respect that. Some of his crew left as well, so I had to bring in a new crew, and it was a really big learning curve very quickly. And luckily, we were starting with uh, uh, a CG stage that was already pre-built and pre-lit, so I needed just to get in there beforehand and sort of relight some stuff, which we were all connected to computerized dimmer boards and stuff, so I was able to change levels and to work on the look there. But as we were going along, we were reshooting some scenes that were shot. And so I was filming and prepping as I was going along. So we started working July 17th through September 6th. And I think I had 3 days off, 3 days off in that whole time period. We'd shoot 6 days, prep. Me and the director would come in on Sunday and prep together. It was really exciting to be part of. There was some new technology there. There were that needed, that I need to learn and learn quickly. We used motion capture cameras on some of the CG work. So it was a lot of live action and real work, plus some CG and motion capture work in different scenes. And it was a lot of fun to do. And I think the studio, from what I hear, is very happy so far. They're still, doing all the CG work. They weren't scheduled to release until 2021, even though it was filmed in 2019 because of the massive amount of CG work that was being done. But so far, so good, I hear. So that's I'm looking forward to seeing that. I was prepping a project, my first time ever doing an HBO limited series. It was a 5-part limited series being directed by David Mandel called White House Plumbers. And it is about Gordon Liddy and E. Howard Hunt and the Watergate break-ins. So I was really excited about being part of that project because it was kind of a bookend to Frost Nixon.
Great.
So it's really about the two of them planning, and it's kind of like a dark sense of humor to it as well because they did some stupid things along the way that is kind of humorous. So it's kind of, I kind of equate it to Country for Old Men, which is has like a dark sense of humor to it.
Yeah.
Oh, you want to talk about directors? I'd love to work for the Coen Brothers, by the way.
Oh, marvelous
Yeah, yeah,
choice.
yeah, 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 yeah. I would love to work with them. And so I was really, really excited to be part of the project. And we just started prepping just a couple of weeks in, and we got shut down for the pandemic.
Okay.
And we all thought, we went home like March 14th, and we all thought we were going to be back in the middle of May. And now it looks like we're getting pushed to start maybe prepping the end of October.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see what happens, and hopefully this pandemic nightmare will be over soon. But I guess that's wishful thinking at this point.
Yes.
I also would like to talk a little bit about Bird Box.
Oh, Bird Box. Okay.
Yes, I need to bring it up. No, the film was released, I believe, 2 years ago,
Yes.
and
Year and a half. Yeah.
it's yes, and there was a huge buzz about this picture because apparently or reportedly more than 50 million accounts streamed this film in a very short period of time.
We shot in a real location for many weeks. The production designer and myself felt that we should have built the house. Would have given us a lot more mobility to sort of create scenes differently. It was an odd experience working on Bird Box. There really wasn't any rehearsals, and it wasn't much communication there. I think the film could have been a better film. Yes, it did stream a lot. It was successful in that sense, but we don't know really. The streaming is a new phenomenon, and we don't know how many times the film was streamed by the same people. Was it streamed for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes? Was it watched all the way through? And how would that really compare if it was in the theater, and how people would have gone to the movie theaters to see it?
Yes.
So in regards to that success of it, yeah, it was successful in the sense of that. I think that's also a PR machine that moves that forward. But I came in. The cinematographer was let go a few weeks before principal photography, so I came in and took over. So there was, there's a learning curve there. There was also a relationship that the director had with the cinematographer before. So I was a new person in all that. I think that in a sense that film could have been pushed a little bit more in a different direction. If you look at Silent Place and you look at that sort of family, I thought that was really interesting. I remember talking with the production designer, and we pitched the director this idea, and where the little kids are up against the window with the paper on it, and and hearing the rain outside.
Yes.
And they ask the mother, what is that? And she gets into an ethereal thing about what rain is. And then all of a sudden you cut outside, looking back to the house, and you see the kids actually in the window seeing the rain. And then when you cut back inside, you realize they're still in front of the papered window. So the mother actually by telling the story, created the image of what the world really looks like outside in the kids' minds. So we were trying to help bring it in that sort of direction a little bit. And there isn't that, it lacks a little bit of that humanity. And I understand that, the mother needed to be cold to get the kids to survive, but, I there is there is truth to that. But as being a parent, even though you can be tough on your kids and you need to push them and stuff, there's a human side to being a parent that I think that's what lacks in that film, and I would have liked to have seen more of that. It's just like the only moment that is in the film when you tell these two little kids that one of them's going to have to look, knowing that that one's going to have to die, and you have to choose, and then she decides not to, have either one of them look. It's like, okay, the mother does love the kids.
Yeah,
I mean, I know I look at stories in a way that I think that they're, like I said, when I read scripts, I try to find projects that resonate with me, and I can relate to the stories like with people like us. So,
yeah,
that's how I feel about the film. So, it's really really hard to say. I mean, sometimes you work on a project that you're really proud of, and other times you're like, man, we could have made that better.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I totally get your point. I mean, it's not a film which I'm likely to revisit that often. I mean, I enjoyed it. I don't think it's a bad film. I thought it was a decent film.
Yeah, it's okay. I'll be honest with you, I've never seen it since we finished filming.
But I also love the some of the actors. John Malkovich is one of my favorite actors, and I loved watching him in that film. That was a
Yeah.
very good performance. Of course, Sandra Bullock also did a great job.
Yeah, I really enjoyed working with Trevante, who was Sandra's co-star. He very interesting actor.
Is there anything else you would like to add about your recent projects or about your career in general or about filmmaking, about cinematography, anything else that comes to mind?
Well, I like to talk sometimes to young people, and I'd like to see more of an apprenticeship happening. I think because of the digital world, we've sort of moved away from that. A lot of people just pick up a digital camera and start filming, and then they say they're a DP, and they haven't had the experience of being in different situations. You talk about Any Given Sunday. I was in the film business already for 13 years before I did my first feature film, starting out as a runner, a PA in 1985. So by the time I got to Any Given Sunday, I had a lot of different experiences in different ways. And so I apprenticed, working on other feature films and commercials and videos. The younger generation has much more access to the film industry now than they ever had before, and that's really important. And it's great that they have that, but I think they also need to take that and apprentice in conjunction with it. I'd like to see more of that, really. And as far as my career, look, I feel really lucky and fortunate. I've worked very hard. I came from really nothing, and I'm very lucky to be where I am and do what I do. I make a lot of my choices based on my family. There's a lot of films over the past that I've said no to because my kids were little and I wanted to be home and be a father, and that was more important to me than making movies. And look, I'm not saying that films aren't important to me. They're very important, but being a father is more important than anything else to me in life. And I'm glad and happy that I made those decisions and choices. If I
Great.
had to go back and do it all over again, I'd do it all over again the same way. I would not, I would have still turned those films down.
You should feel proud about your work, and I'm sure you have many more projects coming up down the roads, and I'm absolutely certain that you will get to explore many more subjects and themes. And yeah, let's hope for the best, and let's also hope you will one day pick up the Academy Awards for your work.
Yeah. Well, thank you for saying that, but it's interesting. That would be nice, but I don't look at my work and wanting to get that. You know what I mean? It's not why I sort of create and like to be part. I just love to be part of storytelling, and
Yes.
that's my reward every day, is when somebody comes up to me and says, "Hey man, I know it didn't get much attention, but I saw Frost Nixon and I really love that film, or Cinderella Man." And when you hear about other projects you worked on, it has nothing to do with a statue, but it has, when it resonates with people, you're like, "Oh, you know what? I
Yeah.
did the right thing."
Absolutely. I know many people don't necessarily, pay attention to award shows, and they don't get into the business to win the Academy Award. I know. I just, brought it up because
Yeah, no, look, don't get me wrong, it'd be nice to get one. It's not in the front of my mind.
yeah, sure. Or look at, how many times several of your peers had been nominated and they had been ignored for many years, and all of a sudden they won. Well, Roger Deakins, I mean, he won 2 Academy Awards now, and he had been nominated 14 times, I guess, and never won.
Yes. Yeah, I know. I know.
I mean, how crazy.
It's crazy, but a lot of times also the way that the process works, it eventually comes down to popularity and not really what's better. The way I don't know if the audience knows, but the way films get nominated is every year the Academy, who we're members of, we get to vote for a nomination in our category. So for me, as a cinematographer, I get to vote only in cinematography and for Best Picture. Then once the nominations are announced and you vote for a winner, then you vote in every category. So at that time, the whole Academy is now voting for Best Director, Best Makeup, Best Costume, Best Production Design, Best Cinematographer. So it isn't just the categories of cinematographers voting for cinematographers. So sometimes popular films tend to win over what might have been the more creative choice.
Well, Salvatore, I would like to thank you for taking so much time out of your schedule. I really appreciate that. I loved the conversation, and I hope you enjoyed it too.
I really enjoyed talking with you, and I look forward to continuing our friendship.